Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Relly Nadler. Dr. Kathy Greenberg and I have been doing this show really now for 20 years, and we're all about bringing tips, tools for you to be in the top 10%. We know that top 10% is a tipping point, and it's a tipping point meaning if you or your team can get into the top 10%, you're more productive, there's more engagement, and more well-being. So we are always trying to focus on leaders, thought leaders, gurus who can help you move into the top 10%. And so some of these key stories. And today we're going to talk about really the founding of ESPN, Bill Rasmussen's story. Today we have Garrett Sutton here, who is going to focus on the story. There's a new documentary that's coming out about that. I mentioned to Garrett, I'm an ESPN fan. I just finished watching First Take. It's kind of the way I start my mornings. I do my stretching and kind of see what happened. Now we're in the basketball season, so all the playoffs. So I'm really excited, Garrett, to talk to you, about that, your role in this with Bill Rasmussen and what's coming up and what we can expect, because anybody who's a sports fan will love this. I played football in college and I love basketball and any kind of sports. And you kind of see now behind me is where I've done some cycling. And so if you're on YouTube, this is back in California and in the wine country that has that green orchard behind there and all the wine that comes from that. So with that, let me say a few things about what we do here at Leadership Development News. We are fans of emotional intelligence. I have a book called Leading with Emotional Intelligence, and Kathy Greenberg, and I also have a book called Emotional Brilliance. So it's all about what can you do? What are the tips? What are the tools that can make a difference? And we know about 92% of top leaders are high in emotional intelligence. So the question always comes up, what do you do? Like now we can measure it. Now we have the research, but what do you do? So that's a big focus. And even with AI as it is, some of the research from the World Economics Forum is telling us even in 2030, things like talent development and focusing on leaders, teamwork and collaboration are still going to be really important. And AI can help with that, but we need these human skills. So with that, let me introduce Garrett Sutton here. And Garrett, he's an attorney. He's a best-selling author of 11 entrepreneurial books, Start Your Own Corporation, Loopholes of Real Estate. They've sold over 1 million copies. He's also the co-author with the ESPN founder, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, Bill Rasmussen, and the ESPN historian of sports heaven, the birth of ESPN. And so Garrett has been a part of that, and we want to really hear from him, that story. And I know ESPN now is even larger. You see all the commercials, and you see that the Super Bowl, their role in that. He graduated from University of California, Berkeley, and his firm, CorporateDirect.com, provides corporate formation and maintenance services throughout the USA. For more information about Garrett, www.corporatedirect.com, and G. Sutton, Sutton, Sutlaw, sutlaw.com. So Garrett, welcome.
Thanks, Relly. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so we always start this off just finding out to kind of get a little bit more of an idea of who you are. Who've been some of your major influences? And I bet you're going to say Bill Rasmussen, but let's kind of maybe even go back a little further. And who are some of the folks that maybe formed who you are today?
Well, I was very fortunate. I had great parents. They, lived together in the same household and, taught me a lot of lessons. I learned the hard lessons as well as the good type of things. But and then I would have to say Robert Kiyosaki has been an influence. I became associated with Robert, 26 years ago. And so in my 40s, and he's the one who said, you better buy real estate. And so I really appreciated that guidance. that's been a good thing. And I've been working with Robert and traveling around the world talking about financial education. And my role in that is the legal side. How do you protect your assets? And it's funny, Bill Rasmussen came to one of my asset protection classes in Seattle. That's how I met Bill.
Oh, okay.
Was through a Robert Kiyosaki class, and he's such a great guy. We just hit it off. Like you, I love sports. I played rugby back in the day, and so did Robert Kiyosaki. And you know, I just love talking to Bill Rasmussen about the founding of ESPN, all the stories, all his sports experiences. So we just hit it off, and I met him 14 years ago, and we've been in touch ever since.
So being a sports enthusiast, so you just met Bill, you know, basically at a conference, and kind of like we're doing now, you hit it off, and it kind of went from there. And so say a little bit, like you said before we got on, like what is coming as far as a documentary about this, and you know, kind of the backstory, you know, about ESPN.
Well, I had made a documentary with a friend on Max Patkin, the Clown Prince of Baseball, and Bill learned about that, and he had people pursuing him about a documentary, and we were friends, and he said, you know, why don't you do the documentary? And so that's how it came together. And as well, he had written a book in 1983 about the founding of ESPN in 1979. And he had kept a diary about how it all came together. And we decided to bring that book back and to add his entrepreneurial lessons. What did he learn from getting ESPN on the air? And so the new book, Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN, is the story day by day of how ESPN got started, along with the entrepreneurial tips that Bill learned. And the other co-author of the book, Mike Soltys, is the historian for ESPN. So ESPN was great to work with on this. They helped us with a lot of, you know, getting the videos and all. So it aired on April 6th on ESPN for one night. And now it is at Tenero.tv, where you can rent it. As well, the audiobook is out with all the voices of Chris Berman and George Grand, all the voices who were in the documentary are in the audiobook. The audiobook's very entertaining. And the print book comes out in a month. So it's just been great to work with Bill and ESPN on this project.
Well, just so you know, we have an audiobook, Kathy and I, on our book, Emotional Brilliance. And just especially when you can hear those different voices, Chris Berman got that raspy voice, and just being able to hear that. So is Bill Rasmussen? He's still alive, right?
Yeah, he's 93 and kind of bedridden, and but he really wanted to see the documentary on ESPN, and so we gave it to them for one night, and he was very appreciative to see the founding story on ESPN, and now it's available on, pay to rent at Tenero.tv. And
so it's spelled Tenero, because I'll check it out later, and I want all our folks to. So Tenero.
Tenero. It's a combination of tener, to have, and dinero, money. So Tenero.
I'm going to write that down. TENERO.com. Okay.
.tv.
.tv. So part of the story, and this is the lead-in that we're talking about today, Bill got fired at 45 before launching ESPN. And when you look at that moment, and this is, you heard me talk about emotional intelligence, kind of that lens, you know, emotional intelligence, understanding yourself, managing yourself, understanding others, managing others. What stands out about how he handled that? And I imagine some of that is on the self side. You know, self-awareness, self-management. What did he need to do for that?
Well, he had started a business and sold it, so he had some confidence in his business abilities. But really, I go to your, in your materials, you talk about resilience, flexibility, and agility. And I really like those three words because that describes how Bill operated. He was is a very resilient individual.
Okay.
And to get ESPN going, you had to have some flexibility. You had to see where the market
Right,
was
right.
going to take you, and you had to be agile. And so, in terms of emotional intelligence, those were the three qualities that really helped him through it.
And so, what did he get fired from before he kind of launched this? Like, and how was that gap? Because that's like you're saying, that's where the resilience would come in. Most people get fired, are not immediately resilient and are immediately, jumping up and starting over. So, what was
Well,
that like?
it's kind of funny, really. He was the marketing director and announcer for the Hartford Whalers of the NHL.
Ah,
And so he's a big hockey fan. And, Howard Baldwin, who appears in the documentary, says it just didn't work out. And so he fires Bill on Memorial Day of 1978. And Bill had had the idea for this sports network in Connecticut. He was going to focus on just Connecticut sports. And he had had this idea for a year. And it turns out that getting fired from the Hartford Whalers was the best thing that ever happened because
wow.
he was no longer constrained
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that job and was able to pursue this terrific idea he had. And he had the emotional intelligence to be able to bring people along with him. I mean, think back to 1978, really. I mean, you got sports at 6 and 11 o'clock on the news for 2 minutes. And maybe you got some sports on the weekend, but you didn't have a chance to watch 24-hour sports.
Right,
And,
right.
and that was Bill's idea.
Wow.
And, people couldn't see it. A lot of people just thought, well, geez, the three major networks are covering sports. Why do we need another channel that will focus on sports? A number of people were doubters.
Yeah.
He had legions of doubters.
Sure,
But
sure.
he was he was an optimist. He was a great communicator, and he was able to bring people along to see that this idea had merit.
Yeah.
And, if he had been a year later, everybody started to realize that satellite technology could deliver this
Yeah.
type of channel to the whole country.
Right.
Initially, he was just going to do Connecticut. And the Connecticut cable operator said, no, this will never work. But someone in the back of the room said, you should check into satellite technology. And so they go to RCA, and RCA only had one channel up on the satellite, which was HBO. And so they were able to talk to RCA and line up a transponder. And if they'd waited a year, all the transponder space would have been sold. So his timing was just perfect.
Wow. Wow. Well, that whole idea of you talk about kind of the big vision, staying with it, and how many people are naysayers. And, when you talk about emotional intelligence, one of the key competencies, especially for leaders that I talk with, is around influence. So how do you have influence? Sometimes, like Bill would be a direct influence. And so we break down influence. He would be the direct, he's selling. But if you can get a cadre of supporters, they would be called indirect influences. So who were some of those kind of key people who pumped him up because he needed to get he needed to get like the lobbying. He needed to get people behind him. Who were some of those folks that were really, allowing him to move forward as these indirect influencers?
Well, it's really interesting, really, because he's getting this idea going, and he's talking to RCA.
Okay.
At the same time, he's talking to the NC2A, who only televised, for example, with March Madness,
Right.
they only televised the final 4 games. And Bill had a contact at this NC2A, and he said, look, I will televise all 36 games. I think it was 36 at the time.
Wow.
And the NC2A was kind of like, what? You'll televise all these other games? And he said, sure. And the NC2A needed the exposure, and no other network was going to do that. And so he got an in with the NC2A. At the same time, Bill is a great salesman, and he realizes that in terms of sports, who's going to be the number one sponsor of a sports cable network? So he goes to Budweiser, and he gets
Wow.
Budweiser to commit to being an original sponsor. And
Wow.
so he is juggling RCA, the NC2A, and Budweiser, and is moving forward with all of them because he's such a positive influencer. They all see his vision. And then he's got these three going and he needs money. Everybody likes the idea, but it's going to take $20 million in 1979 dollars to get this going. And Getty Oil comes aboard. And it's in the documentary in the audio book, but how Getty Oil gets involved, and he's juggling between the NC2A, Budweiser, RCA, and Getty Oil, and he pulls it all off. It's an incredible story.
Well, we're going to continue this dialogue, and I'm jumping in here. Had a little bit of technical difficulty getting in, but the thing that really moves me in this entire story so far, right before we go to break here, is something that I'm working on with another colleague called the plasticity of identity. And it seems to me what we're dealing with here is way beyond resilience. It is truly this capacity to influence and bring people with you due to this plasticity of identity. So we're going to take a quick break. When you come back, we're going to jump right in here with a lot more. Don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. We are talking with Garrett Sutton, who basically put together this documentary on Bill Rasmussen, an incredible top performer. The title of this, From Fired at 45 to the founding ESPN, the mindset behind impossible ideas. So before the break, we were talking about the rejection and the newness of this idea. And any newness, you're going to have all the naysayers. And so what we did highlight, this is really from the emotional intelligence standpoint. How do you have influence? And so Garrett was saying Bill connected with RCA, he connected with the NCAA, he connected with Budweiser. You got to have multiple voices. If you're the only voice, you are going to get shouted down. So it's probably a numbers game in getting other voices. And so from the idea of when these doors are shut, what else, Garrett, is from Bill's story you want to talk about, with that? Because we got the three other voices, but what else kind of helped that? The uniqueness of the idea, and I'm sure Kathy, you saw this too. I questioned it being a sports person, and I played football at University of Hartford, so basically back where Bill started.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the idea that sports for 24 hours, well, how are they going to fill it? So yeah, go ahead. You can take it from there.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, at the start, they did not have the rights to the NBA or the NFL. They started out with darts. And one of the big cultural events they helped create was the Aussie Rules football. And back in the day, ESPN would broadcast this rough and tumble. It was kind of like rugby, Aussie Rules football. And so they had to find content all the time. And, and they just kept gaining subscribers more and more because people were willing to watch sports. And even if it was, go-kart racing or, a gymkhana with horses, they were able to show sports and build an audience that way, which allowed them to get to the NBA and the NFL. Now, they did have that early contract with the NC2A, and ESPN is really partly responsible for getting March Madness going because they did all the games that led up to the Final Four.
Right.
And so they had a really clear vision on how they could help the NC2A. And the NC2A, let's bring it out. I mean, they benefited hugely from this television exposure. And so it was kind of a marriage made in heaven, a cable channel that would play sports all the time, and the NC2A getting all of their events. Women's sports were first shown by ESPN. They didn't have women's sports on the three major networks, but ESPN went out and showed the kind of sports that wasn't, national in scope, but a lot of people wanted to see women's basketball back in the day, and ESPN was first to do it.
Did you notice a trend when this was coming about that we were going outside the United States looking for opportunities? Because I know in today's networking and today's broadcasting, we're always looking outside the US now for those programs that we can bring in. Now, many of them are dubbed in and, changed into the English language, but were there sports that you were actually bringing in? Was Bill out there looking for those opportunities as well?
Absolutely, Kathy. And I mentioned Aussie Rules football. I mean, that was one of the first foreign sports shows that ESPN showed. And they received 10,000 letters asking for the rules on how Aussie Rules football was played. So they knew they were hitting a nerve when all these viewers wanted to better understand how to watch Aussie Rules football. They were also one of the first networks to broadcast Formula One racing. They did Monte Carlo, the Monte Carlo F1 races early on. And, that's something that you never would have seen on the three networks.
Yep, beautiful.
So one of the things, you talk about and with the relationship with Bill, is taking a risk and kind of the boldness. And I know, you're taking his story and you're expanding it to what can leaders learn from that. Um, if you were asked, Bill, and maybe you did this in preparation for the audiobook and for the documentary, like what would he say about being bold and taking a risk when everybody is saying that's not going to work, that's not going to work?
That's a good question, really, because he basically said, I knew I was right. He had been in sports broadcasting with the Hartford Whalers. He knew the fans. I mean, he was in the stands broadcasting the games. He could see how many people were totally into sports. And I don't think the three major networks were that close to it. And they didn't have a sense of how many really rabid fans were out there. And Bill saw that audience. He knew his audience. And that served him very well when it came time to ask for money to get ESPN going. A lot of people doubted him. There were, as I said, legions of doubters. But there were enough people who saw what he saw. And like you're saying, in terms of emotional intelligence and influencing, he was able to deliver that vision to people who could see it in a very clear manner. His message was very simple. It wasn't clever, it was clear. All
Right.
sports, all the time. That was as the simple message that he was able to deliver to people, and enough people got it. And look what happened.
Well, there must have been some magic to his leadership style, and some people might call it charisma, but there's obviously some balancing act that leaders have to do, regardless of how successful they are, because that success is only going to last for so long, right? So when you think of some of the behaviors that Bill embodied in terms of his boldness and his risk taking, and then the reality of his decision making, can you
Right.
think of any examples or maybe some specific behaviors that you can share with the audience just to give them a sense of what it takes?
Yeah.
Well, Bill was an everyman, and so he didn't, just talk to the other vice presidents. I mean, he knew the janitor. He knew the family stories of the janitor, and called him by first name. Everybody could talk to Bill, and so he just had that quality where he was accessible, but he had the vision, and he was able to, again, communicate that vision very clearly. And for him, that's what got him through this.
Right.
Now, ESPN doesn't get founded without Getty Oil. I mean, there's no question about it. You'll see in the documentary, there's good guys and bad guys. And so, Getty Oil removed Bill about a year in. And so, it's a typical entrepreneur story where the founder has the vision, but the business guys come in and they need to have the business types handle the day-to-day operations. Bill was shown the door after a year, and yet he's not bitter about it. The glass is full. He is so proud that he was able to start ESPN. Right. And it's great that in the book and the audiobook, he provides his lessons for how he got it going, because this is a story that entrepreneurs everywhere can learn from.
There's something there that you just said, Garrett, that is really important. And I just want to make sure that we pause here and communicate this effectively to our audience. You and I have been in many, many situations, really, where we're working with very bright, visionary entrepreneurs. And I can actually estimate through an emotional intelligence assessment how long that individual is going to be able to last as a leader in that visionary role. And on average, it's about 24 months. 18 to 24 months. And the reason is because an operational leader is very different than an entrepreneurial visionary. Number one, they're going to get bored. And there's no doubt, as much as Bill loved what he was doing, I'm
Yeah.
sure there were times when he felt like, okay, where's the next best thing? You know, where is this next passion coming from? And so it's important that you have a team of people that are doing that day-to-day operational effectiveness role, because you're not going to be able to prove that
Yeah.
entrepreneurial vision if you don't have the sustainability behind you, right?
I agree completely. And, Getty Oil, they'd invested $20 million. And, they want to have their
Right.
people in there running the show. They appreciate the visionary, but they brought Chet Simmons over from NBC. He was the president of NBC Sports. They're able to lure him over to ESPN. He brings Scotty Connell over, who is one of the most recognized sports TV veterans ever. And they put together a good operational team. And so I agree with you, Kathy. I mean, that's the timeline. That's what happens. So Bill, as the founder, gets it going. He's very appreciative of his role in this, but he realized that other people were going to come in and get ESPN to the next level.
So just to kind of summarize this, so Bill founded it. Was he CEO of, and CEO of what? Like what was the corporation? And then it sounds like and then Getty came in, provided all the cash, and were they having all the seats on the board, or majority of the board seats, or they just talk a little bit about kind of how that came around, and then what was Bill's role then? I mean, it sounds like he got pushed out after a year, but yeah.
Yeah, so Bill's the founder. He's the CEO. Getty Oil is their really only chance. I mean, they were at a point where it was Getty or nothing. And so Getty realizes that they can, perhaps do this. Stu Evey, the representative for Getty, said, this is either going to be a big thing or a dry hole for us. And so, they brought in their people to make it work. So Bill was not president after a while. That was Chet Sims. And then he was considered CEO for a time. But then, those were just titles. I mean, they forced him out after a year.
Yeah.
But, it's funny, Relly, you were asking, where does the E of ESPN come in?
Right.
And
what is it?
It's entertainment.
Oh.
So it was entertainment and sports programming, ESP, which is kind of hokey.
Right.
But then it was called the ESP Network. And then they realized, well, let's just call it ESPN.
Okay.
So that's how it came about. But we tell that little story in the documentary and the audio book as well. It's kind of fun how it went from ESP to ESPN.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense there as you're looking for filling 24 hours, not only sports, but let's throw the E in there,
Right.
for entertainment, that anything that can go in there. So whether it's ping pong, badminton, sports in different countries is all great. Well, say a little bit about kind of, you said that Bill, after he got pushed out, what did he do, and how did he make sense of that? A lot of this is around the internal stories, our narrative that we have. What was his narrative? Because that's where we have a choice. Kathy and I always talk about, you typically have stimulus, same response, stimulus, same response. Great leaders have stimulus, gap, and that's where the new story, the new learning comes in, best response. So how did he transition that to maybe best response?
Well, he and his son, Scott, who's also part of the documentary, worked on a radio network of sports after they left ESPN, and that didn't work out. So, ESPN was his big success, and so he after the radio network didn't go out, he wrote this book in 1983, and he was very popular on the college circuit. He would go to various colleges, universities, and speak about the founding of ESPN, and
Oh,
business principles. So he was a very popular college speaker for a while.
You know, as I'm listening to this, and I think where, you know, Relly and I are going is this whole idea of plasticity of identity is
yeah.
really essential for people. We're really getting away from the word resilience, at least in my field, which is focused on public safety, tactical operators. I've worked in industry for a very long time as a partner of two large consulting firms, Accenture and Computer Sciences Corporation. But now, just for you, Garrett, I work mostly in the special ops area. And so we're getting away from this resilience because it's been overused. And so this identity issue and the plasticity of identity, getting away from trauma and recognizing that we all have a powerful self. And it's that stimulus response that Relly was just speaking to. I mean, I'm putting myself in Bill's shoes. And whether it's the 1980s or 2026 or 2030, which is where everybody's focused, because Gallup is basically scaring the hell out of everybody, saying nobody's going to be prepared for 2030. And if you're not reskilling now, you're going to be lost by 2030. So, you know, what I want to get from Bill's story is this capacity for risk taking with an understanding that not everybody is going to be on the same path with you at the same time. And when you're on a path that looks like it may be a dead end, where do you go? And obviously, a lot of people go into speaking, they write a book. But what is so compelling right now where we are in terms of being a little bit future proof? Does Bill's story speak to us? What is it that we can really grasp? And maybe we'll take a break and give you an opportunity to think about that. And when we come back, I really would like to know what it is that Bill can teach all of us, regardless of our entrepreneurial spirit and regardless of our, if you will, stickiness with the subject, that everybody can learn from today at Leadership Development News. Don't go away. We're having a delightful conversation. Come right back.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Garrett Sutton, and he's given us the history of ESPN. There's a new documentary on Tenero, Tenero. Has had one night on ESPN, but it's all the background story of an entrepreneur, of a founder. How did he make ESPN happen when people were against it, and 24 hours of sports and entertainment? And so one of the things that I think we're all fans of is sports. And it's one of the few things, in our divisive world today where people, their emotions, think about all of the crowds and how everybody is cheering for the same thing, one team or another team. But
See,
it's that
yeah, I don't want to cut you off, but I'm
you
like,
are, but go
no,
ahead.
no. It's just like, I just want to give them a picture of this, right? And in the picture is my son-in-law, who is
Yeah,
a sports junkie, like a
yeah,
major sports junkie. I mean,
yeah,
you're a sports junkie, really. But this guy, he's got
yeah.
every major football play by the Philadelphia Eagles tattooed from his ankle to his chin,
When you
including the most recent, smacking Kermit, as they call
right,
it. And that doesn't mean I agree with these things, but what I think you're getting at here, which I want to picture for the audience, are those people who, if they had their way, they would do nothing but eat, sleep,
yeah,
breathe
yeah.
sports.
So, yep. And so here's the other thing, and then we'll get Garrett to comment. When you think about us as humans and we're dealing with emotions, and I'm the same way, and I'm pretty level focus. But when I watch sports, I'm cheering and that emotions. So the highs of emotions, the lows of emotions. I don't think there's anything that brings people together around shared emotions like sports. And
I would
so,
agree with
go ahead,
that,
Garrett.
and Bill saw that. He saw that as a broadcaster for the Hartford Whalers. He total sports fan. Grew up in the South Side of Chicago, playing baseball and going to games. And here's the thing about sports: it's live. Everybody is watching the same thing. It's not a movie that was made a year ago. It is a live event that everybody is entitled to react to, enjoy, I guess, browbeat your friend who's a fan of the other team. I mean,
Right.
it's just, there's so many elements to it.
Yes.
And people tune in huge numbers. And Bill Rasmussen in the late 1970s understood that when very few people did, that this is something that people will watch for a long time and
Yep.
for many hours a day.
Yeah. It feels this need of connection. I'm thinking about my high school friends who I played football with. We're still friends today, years and years later. So it's not only the emotions in the sports, but then it's the emotions of connecting this special bond. So this bond that you have of people. So with this, we want to tap on the key learnings. And I know Bill saw that early. He spoke about that and he wrote a book. Maybe give the title again of that. But what are some of the takeaways from this for anybody that's a leader that can use from this?
Well, one of Bill's great qualities, and he talks about it a lot in the book and the documentary, is intentional optimism. He got up every morning and saw what was good and what good was going to happen today. And he never let himself get down. When things were uncertain, when there were problems, challenges, he maintained that level of intentional optimism. And the people around him saw it, and he was able to lead with that. And so we almost entitled the book Intentional Optimism, because that is such an important quality for Bill and the founding of ESPN.
And something you just said there is very compelling. And that is, get up every day and look at what's working, right? We as human beings tend to look for what's not working.
Yeah.
And that is a huge mental shift for a lot of people, because we as high achievers tend to go into what's not working. And it's not necessarily a survival issue. It is what can I do better? Because high achievers, to Grelly's point, always on their case, very rarely on their side. And so this is something that I want people to really take away from today's show, is looking at one thing that's working and building on it, as opposed to finding that one thing that's not working and getting OCD over it and going down the rabbit hole,
Right.
trying to fix something that may not be fixable.
Well, we're surrounded with negativity. I mean, it's understandable why people would wake up feeling down. So it really takes an effort, but it can be done. And in Bill's case, it was a crucial part of his psyche, of his personality. Yeah. And he got up every morning and looked at the bright side and decided what he was going to do to make things better every day. And that is something we can all learn from.
So in the documentary, say a little bit about some of these key people. Like we talked about Chris Berman. Like who else were some of the key people? Now we have Sports Center, and we know you got some of the key leaders, announcers who've been doing that. But who are some of the key people that the audience would recognize that really took the idea, but then their presence in front of the camera really made a difference?
So at Tenero.tv, the documentary features all the players who were involved in the founding of ESPN. And, some of these sportscasters were questioning themselves. Am I going from a steady job at a local station in Connecticut to ESPN? Is it going to be around in a month? Is it going to be around in a year? I mean, these guys took a risk as well. And so some of the people that are in the film and the audiobook, and I have been fortunate to meet out in Bristol, Connecticut, George Grand was there on the first night, a terrific individual, and his thoughts are in the book and the documentary. We have Bob Lee, who was there at the start, and right. He's a part of the documentary and the audiobook. And so these gentlemen were there at the very start. They saw how Bill operated. They were taken with his optimism as well. It's kind of funny, in the documentary, we show the ESPN building being built. And they are determined to start the network on September 7th, 1979. The building is half built. There's no door on the men's room. I mean, they just had a deadline, and they kept to it. And it's really a documentary of the will of Bill and the team to get this network on the air. And even though the building wasn't even finished yet, it's really a great story.
And the thing that's really powerful about that right there, Garrett, and I grew up, my dad was an announcer, worked at WPEN radio and did a lot of television. And so I was always in the green room with him. And I'll have to tell you, it is the spirit of the production team. When that production team doesn't care whether they're, like I don't care, right? I don't care where I am, right? I'm having a great conversation with a great guest about a wonderful subject with a co-host I love. We've been doing this for 20 years. And it is the spirit of the people that are pushing out that production that makes a difference, not what building it's in, right?
Well, and that's right, Kathy, because, Getty Oil was the original money for this. And the chairman of Getty Oil came out 3 months after they launched, and he saw how dedicated all the ESPN employees were. The work ethic, you're in Connecticut, there's a New England work ethic, and these guys had it. The chairman of Getty Oil goes back to Los Angeles and tells all the employees there, I wish you worked as hard as the kids at ESPN, So they had an esprit de corps, and it served them well.
And so that internal aspect of the ESPN team is really kind of the same thing, as the teams that they cover. And that's why I think, people they're so connected. It's like, this is the one place where or the one, a few places it's positive, and let's connect. And also Kathy and I talk about presence, and so for leaders today, kind of being in the moment and not have your head spin out to everything else and being present for the people who are around you and developing that team and encouraging them and motivating them, you really have to be present. And I think sports is, and for many people, it's a relief. It's like this oasis. Everything else is out there, and I can just focus on this pure enjoyment. And then we know from neuroscience, all the serotonin and the oxytocin and all the things that get, it's invisible that gets released with that. So what?
Well, and I really believe in the power of team. Robert Kiyosaki preaches that, business and investing is a team sport. When you're starting a business, you need a team. You need your lawyer, your CPA, your advisors. They all need to be on the same page, working towards the same goal. And when you have that team together, it's 5 times, it's 10 times what one individual can do. So we talk about that in the book. The power of team is very important.
Beautiful. It's a couple of things that you can leave the audience with based on the book, based on your experience with Bill, based on your knowledge and the documentary. What might those 1 or 2 things be?
Well, one, Kathy, would be consensus versus conviction, right? And you can go with the consensus, and it's good to prevent mistakes, but you also may be preventing greatness. If you go with conviction, it's okay to make a mistake, but you're going to reach something that's going to be great. And that's what Bill did. He was convinced. He had a conviction that this would work. He ignored the consensus of everybody that this was not something that the American public would want. And so he stuck to his guns and he saw it through. So I think conviction versus consensus is something that people need to realize in their own business.
Beautiful.
So one of the things before we get close to the end here, for Bill, like we always talk about, this idea of self-management. We talked about resilience. We talked about identity plasticity. What were some of the practices that on a daily basis that Bill did? I mean, was he an athlete? Did he exercise? Did he, how did he on an individual level fulfill himself? What did he do?
Well, Bill was a very good athlete. He played baseball in Chicago, played in college, was thinking about the minor leagues. And then he was in the Air Force, so he learned a lot of, things about, chain of command and all. But Bill was also a listener. He would listen to anybody in his organization. So he was an intentional optimist. He knew where he was going. He had the conviction of where he should go, and he stuck with it. So, he's just a great American entrepreneur character.
Well, you got to love it. You got to love it. And we're so happy that we've had you with us today, Garrett. And as I told you, I'm going to tap into you for a new book we're working on called Global Leadership Future Proof. So you and I will definitely be speaking again. Relly, I know we only have a minute or so left. How do you want to?
Yeah. So Bill, so like what's next for you and what's next for this documentary? I mean, so you kind of put it all together. Like what's the horizon look like?
Well, the print book comes out in about a month. The audio book is out. You can get it on Amazon and everywhere. The documentary is at tenero.tv, and we're going to be working with schools to help share the entrepreneurial lessons from Bill's story. So we're talking to the various schools, and as I mentioned, Bill used to go out and give these talks to students, and students as well love sports and ESPN, but to gain the lessons, the entrepreneurial lessons from the startup of ESPN is just really a message that resonates with a lot of students.
Yeah, and absolutely.
What's the title of the book if people want to get a hold of it?
Sports Heaven, the Birth of ESPN. And Sports Heaven comes from the opening monologue at the start of the very first 5 minutes of ESPN on the air. Lee Leonard says, if you're a fan, you may think you've gone to sports heaven. because we're going to bring you sports all the time, every day. And so that's where the term sports heaven came from.
That's great. They don't use that anymore. Because I'm not familiar with that. So that's great.
Yeah.
So sports heaven. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Garrett. I'm just looking to make sure that we have people want to get a hold of you. It's G Sutton at sutlaw.com and also corporatedirect.com. And Sports Heaven, the book. Hopefully people will go out and get that. And I think the audio, to be able to hear all the voices, that's just going to enhance it. So you've been listening to Leadership Development News. Tune in to help tune up your performance.